Good morning. This is Scott Cullen. I'm editor-in-chief of the Cannata Report. It's Friday morning. It's time for Fridays with Frank, and here I am with Frank Cannata, our founder. How's it going, Frank?
It's going pretty good, Scott. Hope the same for you.
Yes, it is. So this morning, we are going to talk about the impact of private equity on the channel.
I've looked at this very carefully, and going back to the early roll-ups with Alco, which I thought initially had a good philosophy. And if you may not be aware, Tom Johnson was working for Alco at that time. And that's where Tom gained a lot of his experience, as he told me, of what not to do, because he saw the changes that went on with Icon, which turned out to be a disaster. It's fundamentally what you have is companies that come into the business the way I'm looking at it now. So please understand, this is purely my vision of what I'm seeing. They destroy initiative. They really have no interest in investing in promoting, advertising, doing anything that would stimulate the awareness of the brand in the marketplace. All they want to do is cut expenses, get rid of the high salaries, and show a profitability, and then rely on the MIF to support them through a transitory period. Well, from what I see, that's not working quite well. I'm going to give you an example of a specific acquisition by Global Xerox. MT Business in Mansfield, Ohio, in 2017 was a $75 million dealership that was acquired by Xerox through Global. Today, that company is a shell of what it once was. What happened? Well, immediately, the people that had contributed to the great success that MT had enjoyed for many years wanted no part of working for Xerox and made it known. They formed groups of 5 and 6 and went around to promote themselves to competitive dealers in the same geography. Obviously, they had a non-compete and they had to wait it out. But as soon as they did, they were gone. I spoke to one dealer who acquired a group of 6 salespeople. He is also a Rico dealer, so it worked to his great advantage. And Rico was certainly very pleased because it means we're going to protect the MIF. But to make a long story short, they took a $75 million company and made it maybe a fraction of what it once was. What the hell is that all about? They took Global. Now, Global, when it sold in 2007, was a $1.3 billion company. In 10 years, they built it to $2 billion, and it took them to 2017. 10 years. That $2 billion in 2017 represented 50% of all the profit for Xerox. Xerox at that time was a $17 billion company before it had split. Now, what was their concept about taking over this golden nugget in that business? Destroy it. They went and they visited with the key locations throughout the country. And a typical discussion would be, you have 2 vice presidents. Fire the one that is making the most money and let the one that remains be the VP of both operations. Of course, they try to remind the people who were telling him to do this, these were 2 different jobs. One could have been sales, one could have been service. Who the devil knows what they were thinking? They didn't care. Now, does that make any sense in terms of, to us in the industry, to see something like that destroyed? I don't think so. I don't think that's a thing we can celebrate. Now, please understand, I'm very happy for the people that sold. I mean, Tom and his team did a beautiful job. They were entitled to their big payday and they got it. And I'm very happy for all those guys. They're good people. But at the end of the day, it's sad to see what's left. The good thing that has come out of that, people like Frank Gaspari, who had sold his business to Global and worked with Tom Johnson for years, and Dan Cooper, who was president for a very short period of time after Xerox took over, and he saw what they wanted him to do, and he said, goodbye. Well, Frank has built FlexPrint from nothing to well over 300 million. Dan Cooper took over Novatech and has done a great job there and is doing exactly what he did when he was at Global. So there's an instance where the people that had the skill were gone and doing other things. But the good news is, in terms of private equity, both Novatech and FlexPrint are owned by private equity companies. So there are some private equity companies that understand having somebody who really knows the business run it makes a lot of sense. I can't think of anything other than that to add, that historically, if you go back and you look at the roll-ups, and going back to Alco, Icon, Danka, and many others, the same story applied. Both companies initially, Alco and Danka, Danny Doyle did a great job in putting it together, but at some point it came apart. It just didn't work. And they were buying dealers or acquiring dealers at some very significant levels. I'll give you an example. Leslie Supply in Long Island, Steve Schloss. They were doing 70 million when Danka acquired them. I would say in a few short years, it was maybe doing half that. 21 of the people that worked at Leslie, when their non-competes were over, started LDI, and in 15 years built the company from 0 to 15 million. That's the kind of talent that leaves companies that acquire and roll-ups. They were not, Danka was not a private equity firm, nor was Icon. But essentially the philosophy seemed to be the same. And I don't, and that may be an unfair evaluation of that at all. But the end result was dealers didn't care if they had a mega dealer in their backyard because they were winning. I spoke to so many dealers through the years going through that whole situation. At first, they were a little bit nervous that the mega dealer was in their geography, and they were going to. And after a while, they said to me, "Not a problem." They said they can't motivate their salespeople. They don't treat their people all that well, and they move on. So good people leave, and the company starts to go downhill. And when I say downhill, in terms of what it once was. So if private equity comes in and does the same thing, which I believe is what they're doing, and all they want to do is maintain the profitability and do whatever is necessary to do that, at some point in time, that myth has to be severely impacted. Now with the pandemic, it's further deteriorating those myths that were acquired. I'll bet you that MT business today is a third of what it once was when it was sold. So, how is that good for the industry? You get a strong, powerful dealer in a given market, and all of a sudden he's gone, and what's in his place is I don't want to call it a mega dealer, but a very significant entity, which is not owned. It's not owned by a private equity firm, and it just doesn't work as far as the industry is concerned. Now, maybe when the private you look at Marco. Now, Marco seems to be working owned by a private equity firm. I think primarily because Steve Gao stayed, his brother Jeff packed it in, and they hired Doug Albrecht. So you got two industry veterans and leaders that know what they're doing. They've changed their direction a little bit. Initially, they were acquiring on a large scale in a broad area. They were buying dealers as far east as New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Now they're only acquiring in an area that can be supported from St. Cloud, so predominantly in the Midwest, which seems to work better. It's obvious what they're looking at is operational control and direction. Make sure they conform to what the company philosophy is, and they're doing the job in the right way, and you have a better means to supervise. The other Visual Edge, it's an interesting story. I'd forgotten about where Visual Edge came from. Visual Edge came from a dealership called Graphic Enterprise in Canton, Ohio. Don Frank and I became good friends many years ago, and he was actually on our editorial advisory board when he was a Minolta dealer, and it was the Frank family that owned it. I think it's his son, if I'm not mistaken, Brian Frank, who is the chief operating officer for Visual Edge. So, at least they have a legacy there, and they have somebody there that understands how do you maintain this? What's the method? What's the business plan? I hate to say it, but follow the guidelines that Tom Johnston had laid out, which seemed to work so well, and which both Dan Cooper and Frank Asperry have done. Both of them have interjected their own thoughts and philosophies, which they should do, but they basically expounded on what they learned working with Tom.